Is that a garland you're wearing? Oh, you're sitting somewhere. Okay, Swadesh is sitting in some, he's sitting in some forum with a garland. Wonderful. Oh. Okay, Swadesh. Wonderful.
Social protection for Gulf migrants.
Oh.
One day strike at Parutla.
Okay.
Parutla town, Jagatyal district, Telangana state.
Okay, wonderful.
Gulf JSC demanding social security to Gulf migrant workers.
Okay. So this is a wonderful, lived-in experience for the class, where Swadesh is sitting inside a protest and he's, joining us, and he's also given us a glimpse of a protest for Gulf migrants, social security for Gulf migrants. Let me. In fact, let's start. And I had Shrestha share a video with me, which she also shared in the group. The video, the story was called Translated Lives. In fact, you must all have a see. It's called Translated Lives. It's available on YouTube. And this is the story of nurses from Kerala who went to Germany. In fact, post World War II, when Germany started reconstructing the country after the World War II, they realized that they were very short on caregivers. And, and then they started reaching out, and, they adopted a very novel way to reach out. Okay, Dr. Sahu, fine. So they adopted a very novel technique to reach out for caregivers. They used the services of the church. So the German church, in all likelihood, I presume it's the Catholic Church, because Church or the German Church reached out. Are you able to hear my voice and see the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, because it showed my internet was unstable, but nevertheless. So the German church reached out to the Indian church and in Kerala, and they were able to set up a handshake whereby 5,000 young girls between the age of 17 and 18, or I think 17 and 18, went between 1960 to 73. And these girls from, villages and towns of Kerala, without even knowing English or German, went to Germany. And there they were trained in the nurses profession, caregiving profession, and then placed in multiple hospitals and caregiving centers for old age or mentally unstable people. And it's the whole story of them. In fact, that this whole video, about 1 hour, some minutes, is a true description of diaspora and gender that we have been talking in the various units, and we will continue to talk in the various units in the future. So, as I said, these girls were picked up from villages and towns of Kerala. They went alone on airplanes or ship to Germany, at places in Germany. They did not know German. They were given some basic German training by priests who themselves were learning German. They reached out there, and their whole, how they were able to handle that situation. So at one place, they, and how the German, people out there, the listening people, how they increase their sense of belonging in that place. So they were saying that what the sisters out there or the nuns in the church did was they would leave gifts every week in their rooms. And they were made to believe that they were the fairies who were giving them gifts in Germany. And at one place, this nun, this one of these nuns in German is telling that these girls were so homesick. And remember, we are talking about the 60s and the 70s when there was no mobile phone. Even the international calling facility was bad. The country, India, for example, had still not gone through a liberalization mode where you could make an ISD. The only way to communicate was by letters. In fact, they were talking about how a lot of these girls lost their parents while they were in Germany and they couldn't even come back. And then one of the nuns was, narrating this incident where all these girls, while during training, would come to a room and sleep on the floor. It was a sort of bonding that they would express. And then, of course, one of the best ways of, in terms of, bonding, belonging, and identity was the church. So they would pray together, and that was, I think, a sense of cultural continuity between Kerala and Germany. And then the movie goes on to show that a lot of these girls then grew up and got married. Some of these girls got married to German nationals, but some of the girls came back, married Keralite men, and both of them went to Germany. And when these guys then subsequently went to Germany, they were narrating about how difficult it was for the guys to settle in Germany because in the Western world, there are no servants or maids or helpers. So pretty much, and because the guys had migrated after the girls, after marriage, they could not take up a job or they could not get a job. So they had to contribute in the households. Many of the guys were not accustomed to working in the homes in terms of caregiving. And there were, tremendous cases of violence, about abuse, uh, and so on and so forth. But they also showed about some of these nurses who are now in their old age, who have children who have been born and brought up in Germany. In fact, during this unit, we will also see how intergenerational settlement happens in terms of migrants and diaspora, how the second generation is that much more integrated or assimilated in the host country, while the first generation is still stuck with the home country. And the interesting part is, so they asked in this video, they asked this question: would you like to go back to Kerala now? And by far, whether it were the nurses who had gone earlier or the men from Kerala who they got married later, did not want to come back because they said, we will not get this kind of health facility back home. The kind of health facility, the kind of caregiving that is there in Germany. Though there were also this counter opinion about the fact that in Germany there is nothing called family. So you go to an old age home, you go to a retirement home. But it was a very interesting kind of a scenario. You must watch it. So there are nuanced messages, and this is pretty much what we are doing in terms of diaspora and gender. So that is one. There's another a series. It's a Canadian series called Kim's Convenience. Let me just write it down. It's called Kim's Convenience. This is about a South Korean couple. It's a Canadian TV sitcom, and it's about a Korean Canadian family in Toronto who has a convenience store. And the interesting part is the Korean mother and mother are called Appa and Uma. So the father is called Appa and the mother is called Uma. And they have a Canadian born daughter and son. And how the two generations are are negotiating the diaspora life, how even though they are Canadian citizens, how, for example, there is an Indian couple also, how this Korean and Indian couple talk and reminiscence about back home and how things have changed. So it's some of these these movies or these series gives you a very good idea about whatever we are talking about in terms of diaspora and gender. Let me start by sharing the presentation. If you have any question, you can stop me or put it in the chat. So today we are talking about women as bearers of culture. And so these are the objectives of this unit. Identify the forces of cultural difference and change vis-a-vis gender representation, about how men and women, and this is much more simplistic when we talk about gender in terms of binary, men and women, or males or females. When we get into the nuanced part of the gender in terms of LGBTQ plus, there are further complications which come in. Then we are looking at evaluate the role of gender in identity assertion and formation. Diasporas have lived for generations in host country, continue to retain their identity and culture of home country. Now, this particular aspect changes in the second generation, where in more likelihood, in fact, in the series Kim Conveniences or the translated lives, you'll see the second generation much different because they do not know anything about the home country. They might still be, for example, Indian Americans or Bangladeshi Americans or Filipino Americans. But the fact is they don't know about the home country and how they integrate or assimilate better into the host country. Take up the customs, rituals, and cultural practices of the adopted country, leading to and also there is this formation of mixed culture. So we have an example from South Africa in terms of how mixed cultures have formed. In fact, small changes you will realize is a part of the mixed culture. While the parents continue to identify with the country of origin, the second generation find themselves closer to the culture of the adopted country, which is bound to happen considering the fact when you grow up. It's like when children grow up with a digital device, they are that much more comfortable with the mobile phone than the earlier generations. The process of assimilation and integration has been found to be more effective with second generation, which is bound to happen because they've grown up in that particular culture rather than having this mixture of the home country and the host country. Now, during the 19th and 20th century, in fact, the earlier all diaspora studies, it was morely a studies of males or men. Women were only passive partners in immigration and diaspora formation. In the 21st century, all this has changed. Now, women have assumed a dominant position. Women are also common links between the first and second generation immigrants and major transmitter. Kim's Convenience, if you see the lady, the South American lady, the South Korean lady, shows how she's able to span, the generations, how she's able to span the Canadian culture and the Korean culture, and how she deftly negotiates with her husband and with her children. In fact, in Kim's Convenience, they show the son as estranged from the father and how the mother is able to make peace in the family. So women, traditionally as caregivers and nurturers have become a common link. Theoretical and concept framework of gender role. Historically, the choice of leaving home was always decided by men. In fact, today, if you see a lot of cases, for example, when you look at India's internal migration in terms of states, it's still the men who are deciding when to leave, where to go. but the onus of retaining memories at home and recreating them and harbingers of homeland culture is associated with women. So you see around in fact wherever you are in India, India itself is an amalgamation of multiple states. Each state is almost like a country. So when people migrate from one state to another state in terms of job, it's the women's task to continue with that culture uh, and retaining memories of home and recreating them. Hang on, let me put it as a full screen mode. Give me a sec. Okay. The reason of this is based on the fact that women have a central role as homemakers. Traditionally, women have a central role as homemakers and also keepers of diasporic culture. Traditional gender norms kept men engaged in work for livelihood while women were confined to homes. If you also look at that movie Gandhi by Richard Attenborough, you'll see how Gandhi's wife, Kasturba, when they go and Mahatma Gandhi decides to actively engage in the politics of South Africa, how Kasturba is able to organize women, and you see the way they dress, the way they keep talk to each other, and they're able to mobilize in a different way. They were primary mothers, wives, sisters who took care of home, responsibility for bearing and rearing of children, and cooked food, and that was the traditional role. Women form the foundation of family life. They still do. It's not that they don't. They still make the foundation of family life. Also carry the responsibility of safeguarding proper cultural tradition and appropriate behavior. We see it all around, not just in India, across, as transmitters of cultural traditions, customs, songs, cuisine, and mother tongue. Yuval Davis in his research, and this is a lived experience. In the process of migration, women act as custodians of cultural heritage. In fact, you will see sometimes various people have said the same thing in different ways. So they might be a sort of a repetition, and they employ multiple strategies for preservation and transmission of cultural heritage. Reproduction of memories, family values. For example, in the translated lives, these Kerala girls would sleep together on the floor. Not in terms of cultural, but in terms of memories of home, in terms of, belongingness. The church was a common thread for these girls so many kilometers away. Today, in fact, things have also changed, and I think one of the reasons why it is much easier for women or other than the male gender to migrate is the closeness or the interconnectedness of the world. So speaking back home, and not just speaking, in fact, video calls, applications like WhatsApp, Apple's FaceTime, you are able to immediately communicate with families and neighbors back home in real time. Now that makes the process of home or host much easier to negotiate, because before you go to a distant place for work or for otherwise, you can see that place on a 360-degree video. You can already find out friends from Facebook. You are able to join groups on Facebook or Snapchat or Telegram. You are able to communicate. You are able to know exactly routes to go, how to go, what to see. All that information is already available. And once you reach out there, the connection back home is instantaneous in real time. Think about the fact in the 60s, 70s, the 19th and the 20th century, when all these things was not available. Women are also the nodal point of interaction between the home and host country. And this comes out very well in Kim's Convenience. They store how the Upa, the mother, is negotiating between the father, between her husband and the children and the neighborhood. And when the husband makes faux pas, how she's able to handle it. Devise way to handle the cultural differences and avoid the point of conflict between diverse social groups. Women, in fact, somehow seem to be more capable of handling these conflicts than guys. Again, it's a sort of a stereotype, but that's traditionally the way it happens. Women have always borne the weight of cultural representation through prescriptions concerning their appropriate appearance and behavior. But at the same time, they deeply internalize culture and religious traditions that often communicate to the other social group. And that might be possible because the caregiving and nurturing is the mother's job. So the children, and that is why it's possibly, and that's the reason why it's called mother tongue, because the mother, whatever language she speaks and whatever cultural construct she generates, the children are easily able to pick it up. Particularly in anti-colonial or racial minority context, religion and culture has been politically mobilized, and women have been called upon as both cultural emblems and as cultural police in relation to other women. We see that across the world. They inevitably become politically mobilized in terms of a culture. Diasporic women are not only cultural bearers, but also of their nation. And now today, with convergence happening in various fields, they not only, are the emblems of culture of a nation, but they also represent the nation in a way. Represents the nation through moral virtues and social norms to reproduce the national ethnic group in biological as well as cultural terms, more data in 2010. So how these, their identity or their existence is changing. So Neera Yuval Davis and Floya and Thia's important work entitled Women, Nation, State. That's a separate aspect now we are talking about. Women, Nation, State is the groundwork for understanding the connection between women and national ethnic process. In fact, if you see when we see news items of a state currently in terms of conflict, which is Manipur, we the vanguard of the conflict. And this is, this work by Neera and Floya, Women, Nation, State. Guys, are you able to hear my voice? My internet seems unstable. Guys, are you able to hear my voice?
It is clear now, sir, but in between there is some disturbance.
Okay, because it's suddenly giving me a message that my internet is unstable. Okay. The focus on women as reproducers of boundaries of ethnic national. This is coming out very clearly in the Manipur conflict, where women are in the forefront from both sides of the conflict as a focus and symbol in ideological discourse used in construction, reproduction, and transformation of ethnic national. In Manipur, we are seeing the ethnic categories. And this is unfortunate, but it's a byproduct of whenever an identity thing happens or identity politics happens, then, considering the fact that women being nurturers and caregivers and cultural transmitters become, the elements in the vanguard. Now, for example, indentured women, and this is particularly for a South African experience, indentured women's unique struggle and the spirit for community family brought them together. The practice of Indian traditions in foreign land provided them. I was giving the example of translated lives. The sense of sleeping together on the floor brought them a sense of normality security, and belonging and comfort, because they felt that all the girls who could speak Malayali were from Kerala, even they might be from different villages or towns, but they were together a single language speaking group and of the similar gender. Remember, as we had talked about in the earlier units, being women poses a different set of challenges. Being males poses a different set of challenges. Being women poses an absolute different set of challenges. And in fact, in one of the narrations, this nun says they were tremendously lonely. And we are talking about a time, when there were no communication back home. And these were young 17, 18-year-old girls. So this sense of normality, security, belonging, comfort, and a link with the homeland. So women used to carry divinities, where they would make a corner where they would pray, which would get them a sense of continuity with the homeland. This not only strengthened the unique Indian identity, but also enabled them to preserve and recreate their culture in a new geographical context. You are in a new place. There is a new culture. The language is new. Possibly the religion is new. The way people behave is new. How do you make sense of the world? More often than not, even if you look at the fact that when you go to a new place, let's say you go for a party to a new house, or you travel to a new locality, you create some sort of a construct which allows you to create a continuity. Thus, Indianness has not only survived, but has been reimagined and transmitted across generations over the last 160 years. This is typically the South African experience. How it works. Sometimes identity groups have to face conflict and struggle to retain their culture, as was noticed among the Indians in South Africa. In fact, the movie Gandhi shows how the Indians were, adjusting to the South African culture out there. And then on top of that, there was apartheid at that time, who were also involved in the cultural sector to practice, preserve, and promote an Indian heritage. Typically, when the South African at that particular time in that movie, they pass a law where anybody can enter an Indian home, the way they bring out the resistance is the fact that, when they have this political, get together or political assembly, one of the ways is the fact that a white officer can enter into a house and demand it out of the wife. The wife is supposed to be the house with the wife is supposed to be a protected area. So there were these conflicts to preserve and promote Indian heritage. They strove to keep their cultural heritage by propagating their language, clothing, food, festivals, and tradition. And that's one of the ways the continuity happens. And that's one of the reasons why possibly you will see that Indians have this, Diwali celebrations in the US. Think about it, the second generation Indians who are not even, any link with the homeland. This is the way the first generation tried to create a continuity with the homeland. Propagating their language, clothing, food, festival. So if you can't do the language, the clothing, the food, the festivals become a great way of, continuity. Women, of course, were at the forefront of this struggle in transforming, for example, Durban into Little India, the largest Indian city outside India, Mukherjee in 2011. So that's how the continuity happens. Took with them images, statues of the river, what I talked about, divinity, jewelry, spices, food grains. In fact, it's a very interesting thing. But today also, when young Indians are traveling, I had a family member travel to Canada. His parents gave him, he carried with him spices. Though I am sure today in most of the places, you would have Indian stores and you would get Indian spices, but there are multiple considerations why this is done. These elements found their way into cultural cuisine, costume tradition within South African society. So this is predominantly an example from South Africa. And again, this continues of South Africa. The current generation of Indian diaspora is westernized, assimilated well into the majority South African culture, values, education, media, entertainment. This would also be, let's say, Indian diaspora in the US or Indian diaspora in Europe. The women in the diasporas have made sustained attempts to maintain and carry forward their Indianness, retrieve and safeguard Indian values, which we see in various diasporas across the world. Maybe one of the possibilities of a lot of non-resident Indians in the US coming back to get their children married in India is possibility of a continuity of culture. Indian values, culture, traditions, and a continuity with the home country. So, for example, I found this. It's a book called Women in Indian Diasporas. And there is an abstract. You can check it out. This book is available. If you can get a copy. In fact, Women in Diaspora, it's a chapter. There's a chapter by Movindri Reddy, where there is an abstract, Curry and Race. That's the title, Gender, Diasporas and Food in South Africa. So if you are able to get across to this, you can read about it. And then I think I found one, okay. And in this particular chapter, Curry and Race, they talked about, but the Indianness that lies at the center of this designation is indigenized, localized, and hybridized, gaining its resilience through cultural adaptation and accommodation. So there is a certain amount of negotiation which happens. And more often than not, this negotiation is done by the women. Food lies at the basis of these discourses, as do gender relation. So somewhere down the line, that adjustment is, the focus of that adjustment is still done by the women. In a location influenced by global capitalism and transnational networks and patriarchy, women have resisted overtly through political activism and covertly by closing ranks and maintaining strong ethnic and religious networks and cultural practices. This is a part of the chapter. So I thought these particular lines were insightful and gives a summation of what the chapter is all about. So women are not only, there as political activists, but also maintaining strong ethnic and religious networks and cultural practices. Along these lines, women have appropriated male-dominated public spaces to create a sense of community and to celebrate the indigenized delight of diaspora food. Food becomes a great way to connect, which we have seen across the world. In fact, in a lot of cultures, one of the ways, what they say is breaking bread. One way of, getting to know people, invite your neighbors or invite the community over food. Food is a great way to connect. So more examples from South Africa. Indian cuisine blended with South African flavors. Women incorporated traditional Zulu ingredients like amasi and relishes like chakalaka, spicy vegetable condiments. This has been, is mentioned in South African tourism. One of the most iconic dishes and true symbol of Indian and South African fusion is called Bunny Chow. It's a spicy Indian curry served in a bowl of hollowed out of bread. I was quite, tickled to, read the name. The dish was created by the Indian indentured laborers and is a staple food in South Africa. I'm not sure whether it's still a staple food or not, but that's the way it was created and that's the way it became popular. Then other aspects of culture, language. So for example, what I was telling you about translated lives, one of the common continuity for these girls from Kerala was the language. So they could not speak German. By the time, while they were picking up the language, the German language of the host country, they were able to communicate with each other in Malayalam, which gave them a sense of security and comfort. So South African Indians speak at least 5 Indian languages: Tamil, Telugu, Gujarati, Hindi, Urdu, along with English, Afrikaans, and Bantu languages thus help preserve the diversity of Indian diaspora. And in fact, we in the earlier units, we had studied the difference between integration and assimilation, and how integration is a much better way for diasporas to get a sense of belonging than assimilation. Because assimilation almost takes your, your distinct cultural identity and assimilates into the host country's identity. Besides languages, religious festivals become a great source of continuity. The Indian diaspora in South Africa is a mix of Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jains, Zoroastrians, and agnostics. More than 80% of the indentured labor that came to South Africa were Hindus, about 12% Muslims, the rest were Christians. So this was the division. How much of the, this is a 2007 study. So I guess approximately the same percentage is there today. For many years, women performed religious functions at home as they were bound to domestic duties, determined by age, which we see across, determined by age and experience. The older people more religious than the younger people, though today around in my neighborhood, I see a lot of youngsters deeply religious, and grandmothers and elder female members guided on ritual procedures regarding rites of passage, such as death or celebrating occasions as birth or marriage ceremonies. We see that back home, and I'm sure that should be the case across the world. Singh and Dene. Over successive generations, women have become more active economically and thus less interested. And this also comes about in the translated lives of the Kerala nurses. When they interview the son and daughter of some of these nurses, the way, for example, a very small thing which comes out is the age of marriage. So when these nurses got married, obviously their marriage got delayed because they when they reached Germany and they were earning very little, and to actually gather money, save money to come back or to marry, so they got delayed. But today, actively, their children are delaying marriages because that's the prevalent culture in the West of a delayed marriage. So, in fact, there was in subsequent interviews, there was this the women, the nurse women, who are talking about the fact that children have a different life, they understand it differently, they delay their marriages, and they were putting the counterpoint of the children as to why they are delaying it. Then, of course, the ethnic dresses and attires. Immigrants have adapted their traditional clothing patterns and styles in foreign lands, at the same time kept their roots intact. Result of creativity and efforts of women folk, the Indian attire has survived in Durban, though with some modification, and that those modification or those mixed things keep on happening. In fact, that's a way of negotiating a host country. music, cinema, and television become a great source of comfort, security, and continuity. Indian movies and TV channels are easily accessible. And all these things are examples from South Africa. Although Indian languages are less so, there is obviously a larger scope for doing research into what's happening. Let's say Indian diaspora, let's say in Southeast Asia, or Indian diaspora in much other part of Africa, how that continuity is happening in terms of festivals, in terms of dresses. Indian movies and TV channels are easily accessible. Indian languages are less frequently spoken among younger generations of PIOs. Bollywood films and TV shows with English subtitles are quite. In fact, TikTok is doing quite a favor to the Bollywood with a lot of catchy Hindi songs, and in fact of other Indian language songs, making it to TikTok and people and getting viral. So I was seeing this particular Bollywood song, Kala Chashma, which is now was a viral song on which multiple people from multiple countries were actually dancing. English subtitles is quite popular. Indian TV channels like ZTV, B4U, NDTV, and Sony, as well as Tamil channels like Sun TV and KTV have been introduced, well received in Durban over the last 2 decades. I'm sure there is more to it now, considering the fact on internet, you can see many more channels. You are connected much more to the home country. So currently the World Cup is going on. In fact, these two news items are a depiction of the old diaspora and the new diaspora. So one news item is how the US diaspora is helping Philippines make the World Cup history. So one of their star strikers is a US born Filipino or Filipina. Jordan is a name or something, Bolton or Jordan, I forget the name. But a lot of their players are US born. And simultaneously, the most interesting contrast is in the US Women's World Cup team, you can see there's a player from Haiti, South Korea, Jamaica, and Philippines. So these players are representing American women's football team, as well as girls born in America who are typically Americans, are today playing for other countries' teams, for their home countries' teams. Now, this is an amazing example of globalization, convergence, and also of the fact that today the nation states have to start thinking in terms of the fact that just because these people migrated and are diasporas, but the connection today is that much more stronger with internet and global media and global connectivity. So I was meeting this diplomat from a Central American country who was telling me how they are using social media to connect to their diaspora. And their diaspora are giving them feedback and saying that for the first time, they are feeling a sense of belonging with the home country. So this is the thing about the new diasporas. The new diasporas are not something that they have to be aligned with the host country. The host country is also to understand the fact that these people will have connection with the home country, and subsequently the policies have to be made. So in fact, what Swadesh is doing by sitting in a protest where they are talking about security for workers going to the Gulf makes a lot of sense, because home host becomes one big world. In fact, I came across a diaspora African women's network, Dawn, where you can volunteer. They have a site for volunteering. You can find organizations. So internet has done a whole lot of help for the diasporic community, for the connection of diaspora back home. And in fact, it's made the world that much more smaller in terms of connectivity. Summing up, critical role played by women as carriers of cultural traditions in diaspora by virtue of their roles as wives, mothers, and homemakers. Women have been tasked with rearing and socializing next generation, inculcating them in values and traditions of native culture. Even though Indian women usually migrate with patriarchal framework and cultural considerations supposed to preserve it, whereas of Indian tradition, process of migration and economic self-dependency give them an opportunity to assert independence and redefine their roles and assert their selfhood and identity. Multiple things are at play today. And I said, with this new economic freedom, more and more Indian women are migrating as individuals rather than as wives, sisters, daughters, or whatever. Okay, some references and suggested readings. There's Ashwin Desai and Ghulam, Inside India, Indian Indentured, a South African Stories, 1860 to 1914. Ritual and Drama in Worship of Goddess Draupadi. This you can find it on JSTOR, Journal for the Study of Religion. Women in Indian Diaspora by Amba Pandey, and Anand Singh and Nadine H. Women in Durban, South Africa, Family and Marriage. Okay, and the rest of it you can read it in your course material which comes. Any questions? Let me switch on the, yeah, hi. Any questions? Hi, Shrestha.
Hello, sir.
You joined late. I told everybody about Translated Lives. And
Okay.
Shrestha also shared with me pages on the book Who Cares. It is care, extraction, and struggles of Indian health workers. So she shared me some pages on the conclusion. And again, that's fascinating reading. In fact, the Translated Lives, Shrestha, was so nuanced and so many things were there. In fact, that's what I was telling the group, that by far it's a summation of just about whatever we are talking about in these units of gender and diaspora. Shrestha? Oh, Shrestha's connection broke. Any questions? Jaya, Saji, Vijaya?
No questions, sir.
Okay. So in case there's a question, you can, okay, there's one more message. What is the message? No, sir. Okay. Jaya, no, sir. So in case there is a question, you can always reach out to me. As I said, I'll give you my email ID again. It's abidchavla13@duck.com. You must get around to seeing this video on YouTube. It's called Translated Lives. It's a 1 hour plus video. Just go through it. It's a very interesting take how these various women who came as girls to Germany, how their lives moved, how they how changed, how they got married, how they had children, how, you know, it's a fascinating video. So have a look at that, and I guess if there's no question, I'll see you next time with a new unit. You have a wonderful weekend, and catch you up. Okay? Okay, bye guys. Swadesh, all the best for your protest. Hope you are able to get the security for the Gulf migrants from the government. All the best. Bye.